Some women don't chase, and yet, they are never forgotten. They leave no trail of explanations, no storm of words, no desperate tethering to what has slipped away, only silence. And in that silence, they carve themselves into memory far more deeply than those who beg to stay. For a man, this absence is not emptiness. It is weight. It is the heaviness of something missing that he cannot name. Her silence is not a void, it is a presence that lingers like perfume on the skin long after the body has gone. What makes this silence so unbearable is its refusal to justify itself. A man can argue with anger, dismiss tears, counter accusations with logic, but silence offers no battlefield. There is nothing to grasp, nothing to dismantle, nothing to control. Her silence becomes the unanswered question that gnaws at him in the late hours when the world quiets down. It is not what she said that he remembers, it is what she refused to say. Imagine him, the man who thrives on certainty, on the illusion of command. He carries himself as if the world bends to his will. He speaks loudly, performs confidently, makes moves with the assumption that they will be noticed, validated, adored. But when her voice withdraws, when her eyes turn away, when her energy no longer feeds his performance, the stage collapses beneath him. Suddenly he is not the conqueror, not the admired, not the man who commands rooms. He is simply a boy standing in the ruins of his own ego, asking a question he cannot bear to voice: why does her silence matter so much? Silence, after all, is a mirror. It reflects back what is already there, amplifying the echoes of his own insecurities. It forces him to feel what he has long buried: the fear of being insignificant, the dread of abandonment, the suspicion that he is not enough. He cannot escape it, because silence travels with him, haunting him at work, in the quiet moments of the car, in the stillness of night when even his distractions betray him. And so, her silence becomes more powerful than any word she could have spoken. For words can be twisted, debated, explained away. But silence holds no edges for him to grip, no corners to push against. It leaves him stranded with his own thoughts, his own shadows, his own wound. This is why the woman who does not chase is never forgotten. Because she doesn't fight for space in his life, she reclaims space in her own. And in doing so, she awakens in him something he cannot kill, something that lingers long after she has walked away, the realization that her presence was not just attention, but meaning. And when meaning vanishes, silence becomes louder than thunder. Point 2 expanded to approximately 550 words: the archetypal wound beneath his ego. A man builds his world upon his ego, a fortress made of stone, layered with steel, guarded by pride. From the outside, it looks unshakable. He speaks with confidence, he moves with authority, he convinces both himself and others that he is secure, in control, untouchable. But beneath this fortress lies something fragile, something he hides not only from others but from himself: a wound. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the repressed and disowned parts of the psyche that shape our lives in silence. This wound is his shadow, the boy who was told he wasn't enough, the young man who learned to cover rejection with arrogance, the child who mistook distance for indifference and never stopped craving what he could not hold. And so, the man covers the wound with ego, like a bandage meant to hide rather than heal. But the ego is brittle when confronted with the feminine in her silence. A woman's withdrawal does not strike at the surface, it pierces straight through the armor. Her silence is not an attack, and yet, it unmasks him more ruthlessly than confrontation ever could. Because confrontation gives him something to resist, something to fight. Silence offers nothing. It is a mirror, reflecting the truth of his unhealed self. In his relationships, he may play roles: the provider, the seducer, the protector, the one who knows. But all of these roles are costumes, designed to distract both himself and others from the wound beneath. When she steps away, when she no longer plays her part in affirming these roles, the costumes fall away. What is left is not the man he pretends to be, but the wound he fears he is. This is why he feels her silence is betrayal, even when she has promised nothing. He projects onto her the weight of his unhealed shadow. He thinks, she is rejecting me, when in truth, her silence has rejected nothing, it has only revealed what was already rejected within himself. The ego whispers to him that she is cruel, that she is heartless, that she is punishing him. But deep down, another voice whispers louder: she sees me, and still walked away. That whisper is unbearable. It pulls him into the abyss of his own doubt, a place he has avoided all his life. The wound he hides is not simply pain, it is the terror of being seen in his naked incompleteness. And when a woman's silence removes the distractions, he must confront this incompleteness without shield, without excuse. The paradox is cruel. The very ego that kept him feeling safe now collapses under the weight of what it cannot protect. Her silence reveals that strength was always a mask, and behind the mask, the wound is raw. And in that moment, he realizes what he cannot admit: it was never her love that terrified him, it was her ability to expose what he never healed. He will not confess it. He cannot. Instead, he cloaks his wound in the only language his ego understands: louder displays of strength, harsher tones of detachment, or the carefully rehearsed indifference of a man who pretends he does not care. Yet beneath that performance, the tension coils tighter, pulling him into a silent war with himself. He rages not against her, but against the unbearable realization that her silence exposes him more deeply than her words ever could. Every unreturned message becomes an echo of abandonment. Every unanswered call reverberates through the cracks of his certainty. And when she turns her gaze elsewhere, it feels less like disinterest and more like exile. This is the paradox of his unconscious. He longs for her attention as proof of his worth, yet the very hunger betrays how fragile that worth has always been. Jung called it projection, the tendency to displace inner wounds onto outer figures. Her silence is not cruelty, it is only the blank canvas upon which he paints the torment of his own shadow. It begins as irritation, a restless unease he cannot name. He scrolls through distractions, drowns himself in noise, surrounds himself with others who will feed his ego. But the stillness follows him, a ghost in every room. He begins to ask questions he would never say aloud. Why does she not need me? Why does her absence matter so much? Why does her silence feel like truth? The truth, of course, is unbearable. For the fortress he built with his ego was never designed to withstand mystery. Mystery unravels him. Mystery forces him to admit that control is an illusion, that the world, and women especially, cannot be bent to his will. Her silence embodies that mystery. It is not passive, not weak. It is alive with meaning. And in it, he meets his most dangerous adversary, his own reflection. Here the psychological tension deepens. The more he tries to resist the silence, the more it binds him. Like a man caught in quicksand, every attempt to escape only pulls him further in. He tells himself he does not care, but the more he repeats it, the less he believes it. He tells others she is replaceable, but no replacement satisfies the gnawing hunger her absence left behind. He tells himself he has moved on, but her silence lingers like a haunting refrain he cannot silence. This is the power of feminine detachment. It does not fight, it does not argue, it does not perform. It simply is, and in that being, it unsettles the entire architecture of his identity. Her silence is not aggression, but revelation. It shows him that what he believed was strength was only dependence. It shows him that what he called love was often possession. It shows him that what he mistook as control was nothing more than fear. And so he teeters between denial and recognition, caught in a psychological crucible that no external victory can soothe. His ego insists she is irrelevant, yet his shadow trembles, whispering that she may be the mirror of everything he has avoided within himself. The tension stretches, unbearable and unrelenting, until he must either confront the wound, or continue performing a life that no longer feels like his own. Point 4 expanded approximately 550 words. The archetypal feminine silence. In the archetypal dance between masculine and feminine, silence is not emptiness. It is an energy, a presence, a quiet fire that refuses to be extinguished. When a woman withdraws her voice, her warmth, her attention, she does not vanish. Instead, she becomes more vast, more untouchable, more powerful. Jung would call this the anima unveiled, the mysterious, magnetic essence of the feminine soul that cannot be owned, only encountered. To him, her silence feels like abandonment. To her, it feels like return to herself, to her sovereignty, to the sacred ground of her own worth. She does not withhold as punishment. She does not retreat as game. She simply ceases to feed the ego that once demanded her constant validation. And in that ceasing, her silence radiates louder than any word she could speak. Imagine her presence in his world before she withdrew. Her laughter, her affirmation, her steady attention stitched his fragile identity together like invisible thread. He mistook those threads for his own strength, never realizing they were borrowed. When she steps back, those threads dissolve, and he confronts the naked truth of his own incompleteness. That is why her silence terrifies him, not because she abandoned him, but because he discovers how much of himself was constructed around her energy. Her silence is alive with paradox. It is soft, yet it strikes like lightning. It is gentle, yet it wounds more deeply than a sharp tongue. It is absence, yet it fills every space he enters. The more he tries to escape it, the more he feels it pressing against him, as if the walls themselves have absorbed her refusal to speak. This is the archetypal power of the feminine, not in noise, not in confrontation, but in mystery. Silence unsettles him because it denies him the illusion of control. He cannot fix what he cannot define. He cannot conquer what he cannot name. And in that helplessness, he is forced to feel the very vulnerability he has always hidden. But notice her, the woman who has chosen silence not out of fear, but out of wisdom. She does not need to diminish herself to keep his approval. She does not need to pour endlessly into a man who feeds but never fills. By stepping back, she restores her energy to herself, like water flowing back into its source. She is no longer the mirror that reflects his ego, she becomes the mirror that reflects her own depth. And so, silence becomes her strength. It is the language of boundaries, the shield of dignity, the song of detachment. She does not close her heart, but she refuses to abandon it for the sake of his wound. In silence, she becomes untouchable, not because she hardens, but because she softens into truth. To him, it feels like loss. To her, it feels like liberation. And in this archetypal silence, the balance shifts. The man is left with his wound. The woman is left with her power. And the silence between them is not empty at all, it is sacred. A woman rooted in her worth does not withdraw to wound him, she withdraws to protect herself. Detachment, in her hands, is not cruelty but clarity. It is the moment she realizes that her value does not hinge on his recognition, nor her love on his capacity to receive it. She understands that if she continues to pour into a vessel full of cracks, she will only bleed herself dry. And so, she steps back, not to punish, but to preserve. Detachment is her quiet reclamation. It is the turning of her gaze inward, where her soul waits patiently, asking only to be honored. It is the refusal to shrink herself in the hope of soothing the wound he hides. In her silence, she remembers what he has forgotten, that love cannot be demanded, that worth cannot be negotiated, and that to give endlessly without reciprocity is not devotion but self-betrayal. Here, Jung's wisdom intertwines with hers. Individuation, the path to wholeness, requires a confrontation with the shadow, not an escape from it. The man must face his wound, but the woman must face her tendency to overgive, to lose herself in the labyrinth of his needs. Detachment is the crucible where she transforms. By stepping back, she dissolves the illusion that she exists to complete him. She sees that his emptiness is not hers to fill, and his healing is not hers to carry. Her empowerment is not loud. It does not need to be. It is subtle, like the way water erodes stone without force, or the way the moon pulls the ocean without ever touching it. She becomes vast in her detachment, no longer confined by the narrow corridors of his approval. She recognizes that to withhold herself is not to close off love, but to honor its true meaning, a gift that cannot survive in the soil of neediness and control. And what terrifies him most is that in her silence, she glows brighter. The woman who no longer chases becomes magnetic, not because she plays a game, but because she embodies truth. Men instinctively sense this power, the unshakable serenity of a woman who refuses to abandon herself. To such a woman, a man is drawn, not out of conquest, but out of awe. Yet if he has not faced his shadow, awe turns quickly into fear, for he realizes he cannot bend her into his design. Empowerment through detachment is not rejection of love. It is refinement of it. It is choosing connection without chains, presence without dependence, intimacy without erasure of the self. It is the refusal to let another's wound dictate the rhythm of her life. She stands in silence, not as absence, but as presence reclaimed. This is her quiet victory, not that he suffers in her silence, but that she awakens to her own. She no longer performs for his ego, no longer stitches together his sense of self. She returns to the source of her own strength, her own breath, her own soul. And in this return, she discovers a truth that cannot be taken from her, A love that begins within and radiates outward, unshaken by silence, untouched by fear.